Comrades, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. And I'll just start off by saying what a brilliant weekend this has been. But one thing is absolutely certain: austerity isn't working. It is a disaster for most people in this country. It means unemployment, youth unemployment itself up to 1 million. It means job cuts and pay freezes and pay cuts for all of us, while the richest 1% stuff their bank accounts with obscene, unearned wealth. Since the 1960s, something like 170 austerity programmes have been tried around the globe. In each case, they have resulted in recession and increased inequality. So why plough on? It clearly isn't working. Well, it is. It is if you're part of the political and business elite. Bankers, big business and the rich are still raking in obscene profits and accumulated massive unearned wealth. The Tories are intent on using the cover of an economic crisis caused by their banker friends to force through the biggest transfer of wealth and power in history. Their cuts and privatisation programme means the end of free healthcare and education, the destruction of our welfare state and the public services that provide the basis of a civilised existence, all in pursuit of profit before the needs of millions. This is being carried out by a government of millionaires who, in my opinion, always knew they almost certainly would only get one term, and are now conducting a scorched earth policy to cut or privatise as much as they can in the sure knowledge that if they do lose the next election, then an incoming Labour government would not only be a safe pair of hands for them as far as they're concerned, but would plough on with the austerity programme. To drive through the austerity programme, an ideological offensive against the public sector and the welfare state is in full swing. There is no serious debate, for example, on the question of welfare in this, but something started in earnest under Labour, what can only be described as a government-instigated hate campaign against the most vulnerable in society, particularly unemployed and disabled workers who have been scapegoated for the failures of the banks and the unregulated market. £30 billion slashed from the welfare budget with more to come. At the same time, coincidentally, as the rich have received £30 billion in tax breaks. So ask yourself where that's being paid for. We now have food banks, or rather soup kitchens, in the 6th richest country in the world. Rather than the big society, we see policies designed to erase even the most basic concept of human solidarity from society. We are witnessing a fundamental assault on democracy. Nobody gave a word of consent to the destruction of the welfare state and the National Health Service, and this government has not a scrap of legitimacy for what it is doing. Privatisation is the main aim of the austerity policy. It is expensive, inefficient, and it doesn't work. Yet we see ministers who invite outsourcing in their own departments, and a short period after leaving office, they find themselves enriched by taking up directorships of those same companies. They would say it is within the rules. It is in fact corruption. I would go further and say it is criminal behaviour, and the fact it is legal does not change that. Yet these cuts are not necessary. There is an alternative based on tax justice, job creation and investment. Let's be clear, the problem is not that they are cutting too deep and too fast. The problem is that they are cutting at all. But the truth is they couldn't get away with this were it not for the fact that the Labour Party is committed to protecting the corporate interests of the billionaires rather than representing working people. Miliband's One Nation slogan is nonsense. It isn't one nation, it's us and it's them, and we must organise to defeat them. Telling us that pay freezes, cuts and privatisations will continue if Labour is elected is absolutely unacceptable, not least because it raises the incredible possibility that the Tories could actually be re-elected if no clear alternative to austerity is given. If the main political parties in this country are incapable of representing the interests of the vast majority of working people, then it is time we did this for ourselves. We need to say what we stand for. We need to say loud and clear, public sector spending is not a debt. It is an investment in people, in services and in communities, and that the real division in society is not between public and private sector workers, but between the haves and the have-nots. In PCS, we have taken the view that the best way to fight privatisation is to organise in our commercial sector. The CS of PCS is the commercial sector. Workers employed by private companies on government contracts. Low paid, poorly treated, desperately in need of union representation. We have recruited there, we have built there, we have organised and won disputes there, and we have given those members confidence to stand shoulder to shoulder with civil servants, dispelling the myth that there's a division between private and public, and taking the view that the best way to fight privatisation is to organise workers in those companies and make it much more difficult for the government to do. And PCS has taken the view that when the three main parties all say that some cuts are necessary and that Labour would still make the cuts, just slower, it is time we supported, and when conditions are right, stand candidates that say no to cuts and that there is an alternative. Our members voted in droves to support the political representation ballot, a historic moment in PCS, giving us the ability to openly challenge the three main parties and open up the debate about a socialist alternative for working people and communities in this country today. In my department, the DWP, our hard-pushed, low-paid staff, over half the department earn under £20,000. Our staff are now being demonised for having to carry out these hated government's policies. The member in Palmer's Green, who was stabbed repeatedly, lost an eye, his attendance slipped, and now he has been sacked by our department. The members in Birmingham, who witnessed a claimant whose benefit was being cut under conditionality, doused himself in petrol and set himself on fire in our job centre. The member in Brixton, who was hit and bashed about the head repeatedly as he had to apply harsher sanctions. And the member in Stornoway, who had his nose broken last week as he sat at his desk and tried to explain the new rules of conditionality. This is what it's like to work for this government today. This is why our members have had enough. And now they're coming for our terms and conditions. Hard fought for family-friendly policies being torn up before our eyes. And they've gone for our pensions, making it cheaper and easier to get rid of people and privatise the work. And they've frozen our pay, virtually no pay increase now in 5 years. In fact, a massive pay cut. And they're now considering the first compulsory redundancies for our lowest grade of workers, many with severe disabilities who could easily have chosen a lifelong benefit, but instead they chose to work. And now, in the Department for Work, they're being put on the scrap heap and forced onto a life of benefit. This is Tory Britain. This is the reality of life under a government where ministers boast that what they did to employ was the right thing to do. They are conducting a brutalised hate campaign against unemployed and disabled workers in an effort to spread division and despair, but also to give a stark warning. If you are no good to us, we will crush you into the ground. Members have had enough. In PCS, with a left leadership led by the Socialist Party to give a strong lead, they have shown that they will stand together and they will fight back. Forming Left Unity, our broad left group behind the PCS leadership, transformed PCS and allowed us to transform the union into the fighting, campaigning organisation that it is today. Campaigning works and action gets results. That is the lesson of recent strikes in the civil service, where thousands of new jobs have been won. Every union in the TUC has a legitimate trade dispute on pay, pensions, privatisation or a related issue. So let's hear no more about the difficulties and the legalities of organising coordinated strike action. The TUC must, as a matter of urgency, get all its affiliated unions into a room and agree a date for joint mass coordinated action as soon as possible. I don't think that's complicated. A 24-hour general strike as a start to an effective programme of coordinated industrial action can stop the austerity programme in its tracks. Let us fight for our members and our class with the same determination that the Tories fight for their class. Millions are crying out for leadership. Millions are crying out for an alternative to a government and to a system that puts the interest of profit before people. We've had a fantastic weekend here. Let's go back into our unions and build for this. Let's have confidence in the justice of our case. Let's have confidence in our collective power too. And let's stick together. We can win, and if we stick together, we will win. Thank you.